Jeff from the BMW DIY Guy. My project today is going to be some really useful maintenance on my E83 X3. So for a time now, I've been chasing a check engine light that comes on. And I get an error P171 or 174 system to lean. Now, there's a lot of great little utilities like torque and other things out there that you can use and reset, check engine lights, check your errors and that sort of thing. But I could never find anything wrong, right? So I'd reset the light and I'd go a day, a week, a month, it'd come back. So I am 100% convinced I now know what the problem is. It's a really easy fix that you can do with some simple tools. And from what I understand, it's a pretty common problem as well that a lot of X3s in the same generation can have, because you very likely have a crack in your intake boot or you have a problem with your MAF sensor or both. So I'm going to replace both today. And I want to show you how to do it so you can take care of this yourself and take care of a really common problem. So let's get out to the garage, let's check it out, let's walk through this work so you can do it too. All right, here we are out in the car. So what we're going to look at is taking off the MAF and the intake boot right here, and we're going to replace this. Like I said, I've been chasing this bank to lean error on the X3 here for a while, and really realized it's got to be either the MAF or a leak in the intake boot, this rubber boot. And so I thought I actually would just do it right and replace them both, considering the age of the car. The price difference was really not all that much, and the last thing I wanted to do was go through taking this all apart and have it be something else, you know, have it be the intake boot if I just replaced the MAF or vice versa. So I took an opportunity to clean top of my motor a little bit. I always try to keep my motors clean. That way if I get a leak or something's wrong, I'll see it immediately. So this could be a good opportunity for you to do that. But one of the very first things we're going to do is start taking this all apart. It's not that hard. We're going to unplug our MAF, which is this little clip that we're going to pry up and unplug the sensor. You can see you've got a hose clamp here. You've also got a couple down lower that I'm going to focus in on so you can see them a little bit better. The bottom hose clamp at the end of the intake boot is going to be very difficult at best to show because it's all the way down at the bottom, kind of tucked back, and it's hard to see. It's a lot easier to see with your eyeballs because you can turn and move your head and look down. I'm also going to get another light right there, but you really only have a couple of things. You've got the hose clamp here at the top, you've got a little inlet hose right here that's going to pull straight out. You've got another offshoot off the intake boot that's got that has a hose clamp on it, and then at the very bottom as well. So I'm going to disassemble here a little bit. I'm going to take and move my air filter just so I've got a little more room to work, and then I'll show you how you walk through all these steps. All right, let's start at the top. So first of all, you're going to want to loosen the top of your air filter. You've got these little levered clips right here that when they're in a down position, you just reach to the bottom, pull them up, and then pull the clip away. The nice thing about this design is that you're not going to potentially drop these clips like you'd see maybe in the F series, which is actually kind of nice because I've dropped these clips a ton. So just lift the clips here, 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 and here. There's one tucked underneath the intake right here. Just get your fingers on it, flip it up, and as you can see, it's now loose. The other thing we're going to do is take this opportunity to loosen the MAF, or the plug-in for the MAF right here. And this is a little pry up clip, and you can use a flat bladed screwdriver or a pick to unplug that and just let the cable fall out of the way. And then you've got your hose clamp right here, which we're going to loosen. Just like that. So now the top of your airbox should be loose. So you can take this and just work it away, just like that. And you can take your airbox and just set it aside. Always take this opportunity to take a look at your air filter as well. I mean, if your air filter's old or is due for a change, you know, you take this opportunity, right? But now you can see, as we look at this here really quickly, let's look at this. So you can see you've got, this is where your MAF connects. It's this whole assembly right here. And you know, replacing the MAF might be overkill in this case, but like I said, I was willing to do it because I didn't want to go through all this trouble and then have it still be a problem. So you can see you've got little metal clips here on either side that you just pry off and pry off, and then your MAF will just walk right back out. Okay? And it will work its way out of the case lid here. So the next thing we're going to do, and I'm going to pull my hose clamp off just so I don't drop it, just like I almost did. So I'm going to take that, I'm going to put it someplace safe, and then we're going to work And I'm going to change my camera angle a little bit so you can see. I'm also going to grab my new intake boot so I can show you what it looks like on the boot because it's so hard to see down low. But I'll get this done and I'll show you what's next. This is my old MAF sensor. I've pulled it off like I just showed. You pull those two little clips off and then just work it back out of the top of your air filter housing. Now, there's a very large rubber gasket that came out with it. That rubber gasket actually fits into grooves on the inside of the housing. And you can see there's really only one place for it to go. And make sure you put the MAF back in the same orientation. You know, the plug came in on this side of the top of your airbox, so there's really only one way for it to go in. And it kind of fits in only one way into the top of the airbox, but just make sure you put it in the right orientation. The other thing I did was the new MAF, really because everything was dry, right? The rubber gasket was dry, this was dry, just didn't want to go in because of that big, it's a huge rubber gasket. So I just took a little bit of oil, just a tiny little bit. You could use just about anything, just carefully for lubricant. Don't use too much. I just used a very tiny bit of oil and just put a slight ring around the inside of that gasket, and then this slid right into place. Put those new clips on, and that's over on the lid. So let's take a look at the intake boot. And you can see how it's going to be hard to show with the one that's in place, but we've got the new one, so we can show this. Now, there's a little fitting that goes here, and I've already pulled it out back there, and it's just pressure fit into place. So be very careful to work this back out of place. Don't break the nozzle that fits in. And actually, of all things, my ubiquitous plastic trim tools that I use for everything, which is, you know, good for plastic on plastic, rubber on plastic. You know, metal wants to tear things up, right? So I actually used my little Y of my little plastic trim tool, this guy right here, and, you know, kind of pulled the hose a little bit to get a little bit of gap underneath. This fit in perfectly, and then I just worked it slowly out, so it's out. Now you're gonna have a hose clamp on this end down really, really low, and you're gonna have a hose clamp on this side as well. It's gonna be a little bit hard to show. I'll do my best to show them if I can. I'm gonna rearrange the camera a little bit, get light in a little bit different spot because it's all in shadow right now. But that's all you've got to do to pull these out, is get both of these off, pull it out, put the new one in its place. All right, I want to catch us up. Obviously, I've done a little bit of work off camera, but I made that decision when I realized that showing part of it was almost impossible. I shot some footage of trying to show where the hose clamps are, and it's like, see way back there, 5 feet in, where there's shadow. I really thought it was worthless, so I really thought it'd be better to do it and then show you what I did. So as you can tell, the bottom of the airbox is off. I needed that just to get a little bit more room and get my hands and arms in. There are two 10mm bolts here and here. Just take that, the airbox comes out. The bottom of the airbox, there's also a pipe that fits into the front of your trim right here. It just pressure fits into place. So that came out really simple. So I took both of those out, set that aside. Now, the hose clamps. Let's talk about the hose clamps. So the good news and bad news. The good news is you can get to them. The bad news is they're a little bit hard to get to. And if they're in what I suspect is the correct orientation from the factory, if they've never been touched before, or I really see no other way to get to them, they're in the down position. And what I mean that is you can see right here, here's the orientation it would be in the car, right? So it's sitting like this. So let me bring it up. So your hose clamp is in this down position right here. Now, the only way that I found to easily get to it is to jack up the driver's side of the car and get at it from underneath. So this is a 6mm, or you can also use, you know, a long bladed screwdriver potentially, right? What I used was a 6mm socket on a very, very long extension, and you can see it. And this was the angle that I just couldn't get on the camera, and I apologize because I try to show everything that I do, but you can see it. You can also see the hose clamp that's here. Now, if you notice, this is broken off, and I'm gonna talk about that in just a second. I think I found the source of my leak, right? But both hose clamps were in a down orientation like this, and I could get to them from underneath, really not all that hard. So I jacked up the driver's side of the car, slid underneath, and as I always do when your car's in the air. In this case, I used my floor jack. I could have used my quick jacks, and you know, I could have, but I figured it'd be longer to set them up, tear them down, than just to use my floor jack. I used my floor jack. I brought the driver's side up as far as it would go, and then I put a jack stand underneath it as well. As I always say, never, ever, ever bet your life on just your floor jack. Don't do it. It's just silly. So always have jack stands. So I've got a jack stand underneath it as well in case my floor jack failed, which gave me just enough room to slide underneath, and I could see, as I bumped my camera, sorry, I could see both from below. So I came up at them with a 6mm socket on, actually in this case, 2 long and 1 medium extension, and just brought them up and then just backed these off. Once these are loose, you can come back up to the top of the car, and again, it'll be sitting like this. And I rotated it and spun it to get it to break free here of this main seal so it would start to rotate. And then wiggled this off and wiggled and pulled, wiggled and pulled, wiggled and pulled till it finally came off. Now here's the thing that I noticed. Right at the last second, this extra outlet here tore off and left the hose clamp and the hose behind. Now, it's possible that that I tore it, and if I look at the material, it looks a little torn, like maybe like fresh tear right there, but right there feels brittle, and I bet you that's the source of my leak right there. I bet you it was where it was sitting here, and that's where, because this hose is a little flexible and it'll move as the motor moves. I bet you that's where my leak was, and that's why I'm running lean. So I may not have had to replace my MAF. It may have just been this, but again, I'm going to be thorough. I want to maintain my cars, make sure they're in good shape, and I figured while I'm doing it, I might as well do both. But pretty convinced that's where my leak was. The rest of this is pretty intact. I actually was wondering if I could see a crack up here at the top when I was first looking at it before I took it apart, but I don't see that now, so I'm about 95% convinced. That's the problem right there. Okay, so now, the good news, like I said, the good news and bad news. I wish you could get at this from the top of the motor, but you really can't conveniently. So you're gonna have to take your hose clamps off. I'm gonna back it off even further to get it off the ridged lip of this, and then I'm gonna fit it into place. And then I'm going to put the hose clamps back in the same that same down orientation, right? So I can, if I ever have to do it this again, I'll get at it from the bottom. I'll check it. Now, I say that before I've put it back on. Now, I'll see if there's any other possible orientation that this can sit. I mean, but if you look at it, I'm willing to bet you, because it sits like this in the car, right? It sits like this. There's no way that orientation is going to work, because there's no way to get at it. You've got all your engine mount and other pieces in the way. Maybe this orientation, but I doubt it. So I'd say the chances are about probably 100% that I'm going to put it back in this down orientation so I can get at it from below. It's inconvenient, but it's not all that bad. You can see it. It's just a long reach from underneath. Okay, so I'm going to transfer my hose clamps to the new intake boot. I'm going to get it slid into place. The other thing I want to stress is make sure, you can see there's grooves in the intake boot right here, and there's grooves when you look at your intake. There's also little grooves on there, so make sure you get a good seal and it's pressed in as far as it can. Same thing here. Make sure the small hose is pressed in as far as it'll go as well, with the hose clamp in that down orientation. All right, so I'm going to get the new boot in place, and I'll show you what that looks like. All right, so the new intake pipe is in, as you can see, and I wanted to share the kind of order of operation of how I put it on. So I put the main large on first, and again, I had the hose clamps dialed out as far as they could possibly go without coming apart, right? Because if you put them too far, they'll split apart. So I had them as loose as they can go so they wouldn't interfere with putting either of this or the smaller hose on. So I put the big one on first, kind of fed it down into place, wiggled, wiggle, wiggle, fit to get it into place. I also could reach my hand around and make sure that the hose clamp is in that correct down orientation. So it's on this side of the pipe facing downward, just like it was when you took it off. Now, I mentioned a second ago on the smaller pipe, which is why I've got the end here, that maybe it could be in the down orientation on the inside or front side of the motor. Absolutely not. There's no way that makes it better. It actually will foul and you can't see it or get to it because of the main pipe, right? Your main intake. So I reversed it back around so it's facing downward on the driver's side, on the cabin side, facing downward, just like it was when I took it off. I just wanted to see if there's a different or better orientation that's not the case. So I worked both of them. I worked the big one back into place, got it fitted back in there. If you have smaller hands than I do, you can even get your hand inside. I can get my hand inside partially, but I can't get it around the bend. If you have small hands, you could even do that to slide a hand all the way in to help you guide the pipe on and make sure it's fit in completely. Like I mentioned, I put a little bit, just a slight coating of oil on the outside of the metal of both of the intakes so the pipe slides on. And in some ways, it almost made it too easy because this one, this will rotate on the intake and it was just free spinning. So I had to make sure to keep it in the right orientation, right? So it's on, and then I put this hose on. It's kind of a matter of reaching over the top and fitting it up into place. Make sure that you don't have any weird kinks in it. Straighten the pipe out as far as you can. Initially I had it twisted a little bit, so it had a bit of a kink in the pipe, so it wanted to flatten the pipe a little bit. So I turned it back the other direction to straighten it out as best it can be. Fit it on and make sure that the hose clamp is in the correct orientation. And then this top connection just pressure fits down into the rubber of the hose. And the nice thing about that is actually that in place holds the whole thing in the correct orientation. So that worked out perfectly. Then slid underneath the car. Here is my whole series of extensions. So I've got 2 longs and a medium plus a 6mm socket at the other end. And I used my headlamp, which is really convenient, so you can see where you're looking. I'm just on the other side of the skid plate looking back at the motor at about a I don't know, 70-degree angle, 80-degree angle, and looking back, and you can see the bottom. You can see both of those hose clamps, just like you did when you took them off. I fed this all the way up and in, got it on. Used this to very gently twist, because like I said, the hose clamps are as loose as they can be. So here's the bottom of the hose clamp, right? So if you push on it, it's going to rotate, which I did once. The small hose clamp I rotated away from me once, which is a bit of a hassle. You got to get out from underneath the car, push it back into the correct orientation, right? So use very gentle pressure initially when you get your socket up there, which is a lot better than the screwdriver because a socket gets a grip on that nut head on the hose clamp. So tighten down the big one. That's easy. It doesn't want to rotate. There's so much mass there with the hose clamp, but it tightened down really, really nicely. Then got the top one, got it straightened out after I rotated just a little bit, got it tightened down nicely. Made sure that this top hose is fit in. And then at that point, we're just going to put the bottom of our airbox back in, which is our 2 10mm bolts here and here. So fit that back into place. Make sure that front intake pipe that's right here that comes off the airbox is fit in. Then you can put your air filter back on. And then the top of your box, which is just going to fit in the top of the intake with the hose clamp again. Tighten up your hose clamp to the MAF. And you're pretty much done. So I'm going to do all of that. I'm going to fit it back together. Then I'll show you what it looks like when it's done. All right, as you can see, the airbox is back in. You've got your 2 10mm nuts right here that hold the airbox into place. There's also a little groove on the bottom of the airbox that it fits into to help hold it into place. You've got this air duct that goes in the front to make sure that it's set back in the correct orientation and locked in. Where the air duct hits into the airbox, there's some little fingers that help hold it into place. Got my air filter. Nice thing is, with this hose clamp, it can be really in pretty much any orientation you want. So I'm just going to have it in this orientation so I can get to it really easily with that same 6mm socket and my wrench. And then it's just going to be a matter of fitting this back into place. So just bend the intake pipe up a little bit to get it onto the hose for the MAF sensor, then fit your cover in place. And at that point, you're pretty much done. The one other thing you're going to need to do, and I'll mention it here and I'll probably mention it again, is now in my case, the car's been throwing an error that it's been running a little too lean. So that error by itself is not just going to go away. So I have an app called Torque, Torque, on my phone, and a little Bluetooth OBD adapter that I can plug in and read codes, reset codes, all that sort of stuff. So the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and reset my ECU codes. Really simple to do. I don't have a good way of showing it. Torque is great. Just look in the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store, little OBD adapter, which is a really good thing to have anyway. But I'm going to reset the codes in the car so I can have this go away. But other than that, I'm pretty much done. All right, one last quick walkthrough just to make sure that everything is all set. And usually when I do car work, I kind of do one last pass to make sure I haven't gotten anything, there's nothing extra, I haven't missed a connection or clip or anything else. So the airflow intake here in the front is on, This is on and clipped into place. Both 10mm nuts are in place. My MAF is plugged back in. My hose clamp is down and nice and tight. This little feed hose right here at the top is in and pushed in all the way. And of course the two bottom ones are done as well, which we really can't get to now, but we know from the previous work we've done is good to go. I've also gone in and I've cleared my ECU codes for running lean, so that way I can take the car out for a spin, see how it drives, and see if that comes back, which I don't expect to because I'm real convinced that that split hose was the source of the problem. So at this point, put your tools away, clean up, you're done. All right, all done. I put my tools away. I took the car for a drive around the block just to make sure that nothing came up. Now, and again, that check engine light, it could take an hour, a day, a week, a month to come back. So just because I didn't get it immediately on driving around isn't an automatic, assumption that everything is completely fine now. Though, as I showed you earlier with that crack in that hose, I am 100% convinced I found the source of that problem. It's also really, really common in this model of car. If you think about it, you've got that rubber intake boot with that rubber secondary pipe that comes up, and your engine's moving. Car vibrates, engine vibrates, everything's vibrating and it's wearing against that rubber. So it's an E83 X3. She's a great car and in fantastic shape, but you've got parts that start to wear out over time, and I'm 100% convinced that's what it was. So before you go, please make sure to click subscribe and the little alarm bell. That way you get notifications on all my upcoming videos, and I have a lot of them in the pipeline right now, and I'm really excited to show you on my next project as well. So thank you so much. Talk to you soon.